It finally happened! Kaiju No.8 and Kafka are now completely one being, evolving into the most powerful kaiju killer the Defense Force has ever known. But Kafka cracking out of his shell means much more than that, as everything for him has changed. His dreams to live side by side with his best friend Mina, to even have a family or children to pass down his legacy. All of that is gone. To make matters worse, the Daikaiju Meireki monster is giving birth to a new and stronger kaiju altogether. No. In chapter 120, after accepting to turn his own heart into a new core, Kafka exchanges his humanity, taking all of Kaiju No.8's 400-year-old grudge to become this. Now, we learned during the Meireki era, Kafka's ancestor also went through a similar evolution, leading to him becoming the little guy 8 in the first place. This was because in the 1600s, they only used primitive anti-kaiju weapons, which meant that the Defense Force at that time had to rely on pure skills and guts. Unfortunately, it didn't yield enough results. Rather, Kafka's ancestor had to watch his comrades be savagely torn apart by the Meireki Daikaiju. This included his platoon leader and even the strongest generational swordsman to live in Hoshina's ancestor, who, mind you, was later taken over as a host by the Daikaiju. Regardless, with thousands being killed, this tragic event went down as the biggest catastrophe in history. But what wasn't told to the world was how the souls of the samurais who died fighting to protect those they loved lived on as a grudge. You see, feeling as though they had failed, every dying warrior's shame turned to bitterness and then pure hatred for the kaiju. This manifested onto the shoulders of Kafka's ancestor, who too had met his end the same way as the others, not being able to do anything, feeling powerless. In the pits of the deep waters below, Kafka's ancestor's heart turned into a core, and his comrades' souls had amalgamated onto it, creating Kaiju No.8. This being, looking like an embryo, was not a coincidence, as it represented new life, but also like an embryo, it required dependency on a host to live on, which is why Kaiju 8 had to find his descendant to then fully reborn as the kaiju killer, fulfilling its purpose. 8's depiction is also focused around being an insect, illustrating how the samurais felt compared to the ridiculous, unstoppable power of the kaiju. But of course, as we mentioned last time, this inspiration is based on the Metamorphosis novel written by Franz Kafka. Yep, you heard that right. It's about a man named Gregor Samsa who wakes up one day to find himself transformed into a giant insect-like creature. But leaving that aside, once Kaiju 8 found its host, it had only planned to use Kafka temporarily to enact its revenge against its mortal enemy, the Meireki Daikaiju, where both sides represents the historical battle between the two races. In fact, No.8 is a fusion of the grudge of the human warriors, whereas this Meireki monster is the amalgamation of multiple kaijus, hence why this final battle represents the entire kaiju human war. Sadly, in chapter 113, 8's core was destroyed by the Meireki monster. But now it's time for a rematch. With Kafka's heart finally transformed into a new core, he recovers, and in a blink of an eye, he dishes out a brutal liver shot, sending the Daikaiju away, saving Narumi's life. Everyone is shocked that Kafka has come back to life, as earlier he had zero vital signs. But Narumi, being, able to see the future, predicted he and Hoshina would last long enough for him to pass on the baton to Kafka, just as Isao had done with him. But this fight is just beginning, because Kafka immediately gets struck with the Daikaiju's signature psychic attack. This slashes his chest wide open to reveal Kafka's new core. But just as it opens up, Kafka's new power kicks in and instantly heals him. Hoshina, who desperately wanted Kafka to avoid pushing his limits and retain his humanity, realizes that Kafka has changed. changed. At this point, Kafka tells Kaiju 8 to calm down because he is going to release him. As he does, the thousands of souls within Kaiju No.8 unleashes around Kafka to fully merge into him. In the midst of becoming a fully fledged kaiju, Kafka reminisces about his childhood and the moment everything changed for him. The very day his hometown was destroyed. He was the first person to spot the kaiju attack, but all he could do was just report the sighting. Like the dead samurais, Kafka felt helpless and wished he could have been more powerful. If he was a legendary kaiju killer captain with a 99 unleashed combat power, then maybe things would have been different. He would have been able to save the house his father had built, or the chicken shop his mother worked in, or even Mina's cat. But most importantly, he would have been able to save his gaming console. Like, damn, these things are expensive, you know, but he was just too weak. It's here we see Kafka talk to his younger self within his mind. Now, anyone that's thinking he's a bit weird, like, come on, you must have done this too. We all probably had a moment where we talked to our younger self in our mind. Like, I can't be the only one, right? Okay, but listen, this is important character development because Kafka acknowledges that his younger self would never want to go through that experience again and says that even though this isn't the future that he envisioned, it's still the one he can be proud of, as he is going to fight to protect the people he loves. With that, Kafka's kaiju mask breaks as he comes out of his shell as a new being altogether, revealing that No.8 isn't wrapped around him, but is him. And so, the ultimate kaiju battle begins. However, to put this final fight into perspective, we need to understand how strong Kafka has become and what he is facing up against. From No.9's memories, we know that this Daikaiju has been around for a very long time and has accumulated various powers along the way. The identified kaiju we have seen so far are unique and possesses abilities not shared by others. For instance, No.1 had future sight and No.6 had cryokinesis. This Daikaiju is the accumulation of many kaijus, so it's not far-fetched to think that it has multiple abilities. We also know this is true as it's confirmed in chapter 110, but one of which is the ability of absorbing others inside of itself to further its evolution. In fact, this might be the main ancient kaiju's innate ability, which in turn sucked up the other kaiju around itself, turning into the monster we see in chapter 113. And we know this ability did not belong to No.9, as 9 stated that even he couldn't stop the absorption, no matter how much he tried to resist. However, we know that this isn't limited to only kaijus, as No.9 in chapter 104 stated that no one has ever escaped, no matter the era, no matter how strong, not a single person in history. Timeline wise, we know that this Daikaiju seemed to have started with the priest being its first human host. With that, there is a theory that this priest facilitated the Daikaiju's existence, maybe due to experimentation or other means. This stems from the idea that the real life event of the Great Meireki catastrophe started with a priest as well. This historical event referred to the Great Fire of Meireki that burnt roughly 70% of Tokyo on March the 2nd, 1657. The fire was said to have started by accident when a priest tried to burn a supposedly cursed kimono, as its past 3 owners had died before they could wear it. When the priest was burning the kimono, a strong gust of wind spread the flames, causing the death of over hundreds of thousands of people. Likewise, the kaiju priest theory suggests that after enabling a kaiju to merge with the others, he was taken as a host, as his body was all used up. The next host was then the dinosaur kaiju during the great battle that took place in 1657. Kafka's ancestor, along with the other samurais, managed to kill the kaiju before it was taken over. But this battle is where Hoshina's ancestor also meets his end and is then absorbed by the Daikaiju. According to No.8, the great catastrophe lasted for nearly 100 days before the power the Meireki monsters stored underground ran dry. But for whatever reason, it seems that this monster needs a host, much like how 8 needed a host. Once their host dies, the amalgamation falls apart, hence why after the catastrophe, little guy 9 found it all separated, hiding in a cave. Once 9 merged with it, its body was then used as the next host, hence why even now this Daikaiju exhibits 9's features, from even his weird looking head. However, in this form, the key difference is that the Daikaiju main presence creeps out through a crack on 9's body, much like the crack on the Meireki dinosaur looking kaiju. Its real form is likely the one we saw in chapter 113. Due to 9 having a superior intellect, he was able to contain and navigate the power of this monster. But without this limiter, this Daikaiju might just be unstoppable. In chapter 116, it's confirmed that when a captain class officer unleashes full release, their combat power reaches the level of a Daikaiju, and it's even more so with Narume, when no one on Earth is able to survive a 100-meter radius when he is in this state. Well, unless you're Hoshina, who also reached full release, and together these two are the strongest close-quarter combat duo the defense force has ever seen. Yet they couldn't even make the Meireki Daikaiju flinch. So when it comes down to raw power and durability, this monster takes the cake. Nothing is comparable. After catching the duo's attack with its bare hand, this freak started to bubble up from the cracks in his belly, causing an explosion. After this attack, in chapter 119, we see that from the cracks on the belly, there is a pair of human-like hands coming out. It is as though the monster has yet to fully hatch, and the outer host it's in is merely a shell. Imagine the Meireki monster's next form is that of Hoshina's ancestor or even Asao. It will be a kaiju that becomes a human fighting a human that became a kaiju. But what makes things worse is that even Narume's balls deep future sight couldn't do much against this monster, because there isn't just one signal or future output, as in reality this monster is a composition of many. But hey, its arsenal of attacks doesn't stop there, as besides having multiple arms, an immeasurable fortitude level and power that's uncomparable, and pretty much all of 9's ability and more, one power that is unique to this monster is his signature psychic attack. After sending out some sort of signal, it marks its target with some kaiju language of some sort, and as we saw with Kafka, this move deals a devastating blow. However, it needs to be finished, otherwise when interrupted it doesn't do anything. Now what's interesting is that when Kafka saved Narume from this attack, the hand coming out of 9's body actually changed, becoming more monster-like, once again foreshadowing an even greater threat. But this brings us to Kaiju No.8's final form, because after tanking and healing from another psychic blow, we see a whole new beast altogether. Kafka no longer has to worry about a time limit in its kaiju form, and all the techniques he used against 9 has infinite ammo, especially Kafka's ultimate berserker form. Like we saw how powerful Kafka became in chapter 112 against 9. He has the power to cripple other kaiju's healing factor, but his variant number 6 modified Thunder Emperor showcases the bare minimum of what we can expect from Kaiju No.8. With Narume going overdrive using his balls deep future sight, he pretty much understands how this Meireki monster fights, and he'll pass on this information to help Kafka win against this monster. However, like I said, once the Meireki's true form hatches, this fight will be not just against Kafka's Kaiju 8, but against the entire defense force, where we will see more of Rino and Kikuru coming into play. Let me know in the comment section below how you think this will end. With that, if you want more peak fiction, then make sure to watch this video next!